Well, welcome to our webinar this evening. We're excited about the problems we're going to be solving tonight with Shannon. She's our mom, and she's got a lot of children and some issues between her children that she'd like some ideas to help with. So, Scott, why don't we give Shannon some help tonight?
All right, Shannon, let me ask you some questions here to get us started. Can you tell me who lives in your home? Just first names is fine.
Okay, my husband Wes and I, and my 7 children are Emily, Sarah, Hannah, Jonathan, Sophie, Joshua, and Eliana. Did you get that?
Sophie, and what was the last one?
Eliana, Eliana.
And what was your husband's name?
Wes, Wes.
Got it. Okay. And are those children in order of their ages?
Yes.
Can you just run down the ages for me, just so I know
Sure.
how we're talking about?
15, 12, 10, 7, 5, 3, and 1.
Oh, great. So that means I missed somebody. I've got Emily, Sarah, Hannah, Jonathan, Sophie, and Eliana. Who did I miss?
Oh, I think I missed somebody. It's 15, 12. Sorry. It's 15, 12, and 10. Did I say that?
15, 12, and 10. Yeah. Is that Emily, Sarah, and Hannah?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Jonathan is 7.
Okay.
We'll do it this way. Jonathan is 7. Sophie is 5. Joshua is 3. Eliana is 1.
Poor Joshua.
I got him now.
I forgot Josh. Oh.
That's really
I guess
good.
he's not the problem.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what's going on in your home and how we can help you?
Okay, sure. Well, the main thing that I wanted help with was a lot of sibling rivalry we're seeing,
Okay.
especially between Emily and Hannah. They are very similar personalities. We have a lot of, I like to say we have a lot of chiefs and not a lot of Indians in our family.
Okay.
So lots of leaders, not a lot of followers, and those leaders like to control. And so there's a lot of bossiness from the older ones, especially to the younger ones, but specifically with my first and third, Emily and Hannah. And Hannah, she's 10, and she will fight for that control from the older one. And it's just, I feel like I'm putting out fires. My husband and I feel like we're putting out fires. He works from home a lot, and so he sees a lot of what's going on. And even there's things like we'll try to discipline the smaller children or tell them something, and the older ones will come in and interject and try to boss around the younger ones while we're disciplining them. So then we are saying, okay, you be quiet so we can be the parents, and we can't even, focus on the one problem or.
Yes, I understand.
So, that's the main issue. We just want a little bit more peace and harmony in the family, and especially for the first and third one to like each other a little bit more than we see happening.
Okay. Can I have a whiteboard?
Sure.
All right. If we were to outline your family here, let's see. Do I have a? I'm going to try to diagram your family. For those,
Okay.
Are you watching this on a computer?
Yes.
Can you see what I'm doing?
I only see the two of you with your headphones on.
Okay.
I don't see it.
All right. That's okay. You don't have to see this, but what I'm doing is I am drawing circles that are in a circle. And each of these circles represent the 7 members of your family. The 9 members of your family.
Okay.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow, isn't that great? Okay, and I'm going to label each of them. So we've got Dad and Mom represent the first 2. Then we're going to take this around by age. We've got Emily, Sarah, Hannah. We've got Jonathan. We've got Sophie. We've got Joshua, and we've got Eliana. Can you see what I'm doing or not?
No.
It's not important that you see it. I'll just describe it to you. What I'm doing is
Okay.
I'm drawing a circle of circles. Each one of the smaller circles represent a member of your family.
Okay.
And what you're telling me is that there is a lot of conflict between Emily. So I'm going to draw a wiggly line between Emily and Hannah, because between them we
Okay.
have a considerable amount of conflict. Is that what you're saying? That they generate conflict between themselves? Let me ask
Yes.
you a question. Emily is 15 years old. How do you get along with Emily? Would you say, and I'm mainly asking the question, would you say a high amount of conflict or a low amount of conflict in your relationship with Emily?
I'd say medium to low. We relate pretty well, but Emily is a hard person in general to get along with because her level of tolerance is really low.
Okay.
So in a large family, you need to have a high level of tolerance and being able to let things go, and that's really hard for her. So, for instance, if someone's using the bathroom and she wants to use the bathroom, it's not pleasant, you know. So there's a lot of irritability, but especially with Hannah.
Okay.
So
why? And tell me. Let's go back. I want to ask a couple more questions about Emily here. How does Emily get along with Dad? Would you
Well,
say high
actually,
conflict? Or?
Dad's on the phone right now, so he could probably answer.
Oh, good, Wes.
Yeah, I'm right here too. I joined in.
Great.
And I think, I mean, as far it probably varies a little bit, and I would say that Emily's relationship between her mom and her, and between her and I, it actually differs. It's like she picks whoever is giving her mostly what she wants. In the most recent future is kind of who she sticks to, and since sometimes I have to be the more of the disciplinarian and the person, you know, kind of drawing the line in the sand, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult between us.
Okay.
She doesn't like to open up and talk a lot. So when we go out on dates, for example, and we sit down across the table from each other and I start asking questions and just talking to her, it's sometimes hard for her to open up.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you both this question. How would you characterize Emily's relationship with the rest of her siblings? Is she generally a difficult person to get along with, or is she have better relationships with some than others?
Yes, she's a hard person to get along with. She does room with Sarah, and Sarah and her have very different personalities. Sarah is a follower by nature, you know, if we're going to describe leader and follower, and so she lets things go. But Sarah will come to us and say, you know, she's being mean to me, or you know, whatever, and we'll have.
You mentioned control too. I just wanted to add something to that. She does really, really well with the younger children. She loves the babies, and she loves, you know, the little ones. She always has just been great with them, and it just kind of reaches a point where as soon as they start getting old enough where they're kind of making their own choices and they're not following everything that you know she wants them to do necessarily, that's kind of the point, you know, when she kind of turns on them a little bit too. So
that makes sense. Okay. I'm getting a picture. I'm getting a good picture of Emily here. Let's move to Hannah for a moment. How would you characterize Hannah's relationship with Mom?
I think we have a great relationship. She can, you know, there's always a little bit of sometimes where, you know, I need to do this, and she doesn't like that. But we have a very loving relationship. We hug and, you know, show affection towards each other and do things together. She really likes to follow whatever I'm doing. If I'm, you know, doing the dishes or cleaning, we're packing right now. She packed probably 50 boxes last week with me. So she's very much wanting to follow whatever I'm doing around the house and things like that. So
Would you say
we
that?
have a pretty good
And so, what about the conflict level? Would you say the conflict level then is low between you and Hannah?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
and what about between Hannah and Dad? What's the conflict level there?
What do you think?
I think it's pretty low as well. I think there's like with anybody, there's times when we have our issues, but I think for the most part, Hannah's just a really sweet. She's got a really big heart, and so she's very receptive to sitting down and having time with her, talking with her. If you kind of get down to her level, that kind of person, she will just absorb it all. She just eats that up, and she loves it.
That's great.
So it's all about really spending quality time with her. I think that really feeds her love bank.
Okay. What about Hannah in relationship to her siblings? Not counting Emily, the rest of her siblings. How does she handle those relationships? Would you say there's a lot of conflict? Is she easy to be around or be with, or do we have conflict generated there?
I think she gets along well with everybody, but definitely she has that control side or that leader in her, like Wes was describing with Emily, but on a smaller scale, in that she can let things go. But she tries. It's that whole tattling or just trying. No, I'm going to sit there. You move, kind of thing, without being polite, and those type of harsh words towards her siblings that can come out. Probably because she's third and she's over 4 other children.
Yeah, her and Emily, they both have this tendency, and this is what I see causes a lot of the little things, the conflicts that happen. There's always conflicts that happen a lot in any family, but
Sure.
what I see it really raising the bar is because Hannah in particular doesn't let things go very easily, and neither does Emily. And so once they get on a roll and they start down the path of sort of, bouncing back and forth, whatever the issue happens to be, it just quickly spirals out of control, and it gets out of hand.
Who's going to win?
Neither of them want to give up.
Right.
Neither of them want to let go and just say, okay, fine, and walk away. And they both have a lot to say. So that's I think the reason why you see it more between those two in particular. And it's just a personality thing. Some of the personalities of our other children, like Sarah, for example, she has the ability to listen, to know when not to say anything. If she's being disciplined, for example, instead of arguing back, she'll just kind of quietly listen, and she'll say, okay, I'm sorry. And that just diffuses, any situation that we're in.
That makes sense. It sounds like Emily, let's talk about Emily first of all here. It sounds like Emily has some real strengths, leadership qualities, and
Definitely.
and often leaders have, by definition, the ability to figure out how other people ought to fit into their agendas. And so when people don't, then they often can react to that because their objectives are being hindered by obstacles. Okay? What I think needs to happen here with Emily is she has some good leadership qualities. And let's go back. In talking about sibling conflict, we have to communicate and work with the children independently in regards to their relating patterns with other people. So I'm sure you're doing that already, but that's why I'm honing in on Emily, because I think it's important to have meetings with Emily that are Emily meetings that are helping Emily work on the weaknesses that she has so that we can bolster those and provide some balancing strength so that she could be a most effective leader. So often I say to young people, and if Emily were in my office, I'd be saying to her this, I'd say God brings everybody into a family for a purpose and a reason, whether that's a blended family or a single parent family or grandparents raising children, or in my case, adopting children into our home. God brings those people into a family for a reason, and many times the reason is to benefit the other members of the family in order to help them grow and develop. Now that can be rather annoying sometimes because there are some personalities that rub against each other, or people who are annoying, and so on. And so it's very important for us to develop skills now as we are in childhood or adolescence, as Emily is, and so that we can be more effective. And if Emily can grab on this idea of responding well to the challenges that she faces in her relationship with Hannah, then we can see some significant growth that'll help Emily later on. Because it's likely, and this is what I would say to Emily, God is probably preparing you for something, And Hannah's part of that preparation. And it may be that someday you will work with someone or live with someone in a dorm, or maybe in your own family someday, who has similar traits to Hannah. And if you can learn now how to relate to a Hannah type of person, God can prepare you for what's going to happen later on. So, Emily, this is what we're going to do. And so I would be very direct with Emily, and I would say we're going to establish some rules of the game for you as you're trying to develop some movement forward. One, we know that sometimes Hannah can be stubborn. We know that sometimes she has her own ideas of what she wants to do. And therefore, we want to, when that takes place, and when she's doing the wrong thing, when she's sinning, or when she's being selfish or stepping out of line, then we want to take action. So I want you to know I will support you in that when she's doing the wrong thing. But I think it's important for you to do the right thing, first of all. But secondly, there are times when we just need to know how to relate to the Hannah type of person. And so there are some things that we're going to be working on here in order to help you. And those things are these. I think we're going to work with Emily to help her learn how to communicate, how to learn how to negotiate, how to compromise, how to persuade, all of these very important relational skills that are necessary, and we're going to do that in particular in relationship to the conflict that she's experiencing with her sister. Does that make sense to start with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now here's what I would suggest. I would suggest to Emily that there's a difference between problems and conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we all have goals in our lives. We have tasks that we're trying to accomplish. Tasks aren't necessarily problems. Tasks are the work of family life. It's I'm trying to get myself ready in the morning. I'm trying to find my CD player that I had yesterday. I'm trying to gather my things together. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch some TV, or I'm going to read a book. All of that is the tasks that we choose to do in life. Emily chooses to do some tasks. Some are given to her that are chores and other things, okay? But sometimes tasks are interrupted by problems. Problems are when a obstacle gets in the way of an objective. The obstacle is that I can't find my book because Hannah has it. Or I want to watch this particular show on TV, but Hannah is trying to maneuver the situation so that I can't. Or I'm trying to accomplish a task and Hannah's getting in the way of that. And I think that that Emily will often find herself in a situation where she has a problem, that is, she has an obstacle in her way that involves her sister. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, here's what's very important. In order for Emily to be successful in her life, she needs to know the difference between solving a problem and generating conflict. Those are two very distinctly different scenarios. We could solve a problem with Hannah that doesn't require us generating conflict. Now, Hannah may generate conflict, so we have to have a plan for dealing with conflict too. It's unreasonable to assume that we'll be conflict-free for the rest of our lives, because other people generate conflict, and sometimes we do too. But here's when we move problems to conflict. It's when an angry word is said, or a sarcastic remark, or a dirty look, or a disgusted look. At that moment, the person who is doing that is escalating a problem into a conflict. Now, Emily's 15 years old. What we're going to try to teach Emily to do, and so I would meet with Emily alone, and I'd say, Emily, I need your help. Because I know that sometimes you experience problems in family life, and I know Hannah's sometimes one of those people in your life that becomes a problem for you. And so I want to give you the problem-solving skills that you can use to solve the problem without generating conflict. That's my goal. Now, I want you to know Hannah may generate conflict, and if she does, we'll have to move into some conflict management skills. But what we want to try to do here is we want to manage the problems as problems, and we want to keep problems instead of moving into conflict. Does that make sense to you, Emily? That's what we're saying. Does that make sense to you guys, right. Shannon and Wes?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay. What we're doing here is we're trying to give Emily a vision for something by phrasing her, by defining her problem in life in some very clear terms that look at relationships. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say that you can handle any problem in life without generating or escalating it into a conflict. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I want to help you. In fact, I'd like to meet with you a couple of times in the course of the day, and I want to talk about some of the problems that you had and how you solved them. And I know you experience problems a lot in our family. We got a lot of people running around here. I mean, our family, we have 5 children, so I can imagine what it might be like to have 9 people living in your home. But, and Joanne, she grew up in a family with 9 children, so that's 11 people running around in her home. So I would say to Emily, we're going to try to keep problems, and I need your help. Emily's the oldest, it looks like, right? So we're saying, Emily, I need your help here. Let's work on this, because when we develop this, we're going to then pass this on to the others, and we're going to teach them how to keep problems. Because when problems turn into conflict, then we have to go to a whole different class. We've got to start working on some other kind of solution. So number 1, if Hannah generates conflict with you, then we have to go to a different bucket of solutions. One of those is to come and talk to me, and I'll try to give you some ideas. When we're dealing with conflict, just as a parenthesis for a moment, we do a lot of things. 1, we slow down the process. Second thing we do is we ignore sometimes. A third thing is we try to get it back to the problem by refocusing on the problem instead of being on the conflict. So there's a lot of things we take out of the conflict bucket when that is generated. But at this point, what we're saying to Emily is, Emily, look, if Hannah generates conflict, come and see me, and let's brainstorm together how we're going to solve that problem. Okay? But for now, I want to try to keep problems. So let's say that you, let's have an example where Hannah has taken something of yours. Let's say your iPod is missing, and you find out Hannah has it, or she moved it or something. That is a problem. Now, let's brainstorm together. How can we solve that as a problem without turning it into conflict? And then we're going to brainstorm with her and give her ideas for problem solving. Problem solving, all children need to learn how to solve problems. We've got to help them do that, and life in a large family gives us lots of opportunity to solve them. And so we're going to give her some of those techniques. Techniques for problem solving are to identify the problem, to articulate the problem, to brainstorm about solutions for a problem, to choose the solution that you want to implement, and to move forward. All of that requires communication, creativity, and analysis. And those are complex skills for many children. I'm just going to say that a little bit slower. Communication, analysis, and creativity are all very important in the problem-solving process. Okay, when any one of those gets messed up, then we get into trouble. Emily's 15. Developmentally, she ought to be able to handle this. So we're going to look at some ways in order to help her with this. Hannah is 10. Hannah hasn't moved into that first stage of adolescence yet, and therefore may not have the same problem-solving skills that Hannah has. So Emily has some more skills than Hannah. Okay? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Now, what you want to do is you want to start journaling, and you want to start developing some solutions for Emily. On the one hand, what we're trying to do is teach Emily how to respond to Hannah in more appropriate ways, and teach her how to respond to life, really, with some more problem-solving skills. But when Emily starts generating conflict, and that's really what the problem is here for you, that's when it gets frustrating for you, and that's when it generates some hurt feelings in others. When Emily does that, then you want to be firm with Emily, and you want to discipline her. And you want to pull her out of the situation, and you want to confront her and say, Emily, what you did there was wrong. And she'll say, but Hannah did such and such. And you say, you know, you're probably right, and we'll talk about what Hannah did in a minute. But let's talk about where you got off track and you moved the problem into a conflict. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
If you can get Emily as an ally here and working together first, then we're going to be able to move that back down into other situations as we address Hannah and other kids and the relationships that we face.
And so maybe that's part of the communication to Emily is I'm thinking one thing that I keep rolling over in my brain right now is motivation. I'm trying to think of what's going to be the motivating factor for Emily to want, to desire to change her behavior. Some of the skill sets that you talked about, I think, you know, maybe I've seen her demonstrate those skill sets outside of the home. So it's frustrating sometimes when we're in another environment. Let's say we're at my parents' house, you know, with family around Thanksgiving or Christmas or whenever, or we're at the church or in a situation where we're with friends. We see the behavior completely different. She seems to have those skills. She has the ability, the self-control to control those emotions, but she chooses not to when it's just our family, because that's when you let your barriers down, right? That's when you feel the most comfortable. And so we need to find a way that she's going to be motivated to basically use those skills, those problem-solving skills, in everyday life with just our family around.
Good. Let me give you a couple ideas about that motivation process. One is you're going to use firmness to make her present relating styles uncomfortable. And so you're going to call her out when she's doing the wrong thing because she's doing the wrong thing. It's not a relational problem as much as an Emily problem that we're going to address. We'll address Hannah too, but we're going to work on Emily in this. So firmness is going to be a very important motivator here. But another one that comes very close in its importance is visioning. And so one of the things you're going to be saying to Emily is, the reason that we're doing this is, and visioning is characterized by the word why. And why produces motivation in children. So it's a very positive way of approaching this to say, I want you to be the model here of what we're going to do in our family. That's one that I've mentioned to you. Another is, this is going to help you later on when you get to be relating to other people in life, number 2. Number 3, you're a great leader. We want to help you develop the balancing skills here that will help you with that. Hannah's part of your training experience. All of that becomes the why that produces this motivation inside of a child. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that actually really makes a lot of sense, because I think what you're doing then is you're calling out the positive parts of Emily, which she has a lot of, very positive things, and so we're trying to, encourage her and say, the reason why you're doing this is because this is going to help make you a better person.
Yes. Now let me also add to that we want to be praying for, and with Emily, I would suggest praying with her about this problem is important, because when we do that, we can draw on spiritual resources to deal with relational issues. Spiritual resources are a great tool for relational and emotional challenges we face in life. Emily's facing both of those, relational challenges and emotional challenges. We haven't really talked about the emotional side of this yet, but she's facing both of those, and we know that the Holy Spirit produces inside of us some energy in the form of the fruit of the Spirit, he calls. When we have the fruit of the Spirit in our lives, we have the qualities that are necessary for her to be successful. Those are things like gentleness, patience, self-control, peace inside of her heart in the midst of all of this. All of that is supernatural empowering that comes from God's Spirit. So that also becomes an inner motivation inside of a child. So prayer will get her in touch with that as she relies on the Holy Spirit in her own life. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
I just want to make you aware of one more area before we open the phone lines and let some other people ask us some questions about this same issue, and that is that this area of emotions, because I think that one of the reasons that Emily is experiencing problems with Hannah is because of accumulated offenses. Accumulated offenses over a long period of time generate a residual anger, and so she's more prone to be angry with her sister than she would be in other areas of life because of these accumulated offenses. And so that's all the more reason that we need to have a plan for dealing with this, because if Emily can see this as that she's not a victim of Hannah's weaknesses, but she has the solutions to work through all of this, then we can see the much more effective approach with her. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, we see that, and for no reason we don't see any reason, but she'll just be so angry at Hannah, and it's like what you're saying. She's filling that victim role, and offended because of all the accumulated offenses that she has in her mind.
And that's a danger, and I think it's important to understand for her that she needs to understand that if she develops a plan like we're trying to develop with her, and she is responsive to God in her life, she will avoid becoming hard-hearted and bitter at the offenses that are coming her way. So that's very important. I would recommend that you look with her at a verse in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12, I believe it is, because it says in 1 Peter 4:12, don't be surprised at the fiery trial that comes your way as if something strange were happening to you. Now, that verse is talking about being treated unfairly because of your faith. That's what the verse is about. But I think we can apply that too to being surprised at the interruptions that we experience in life or the trials that we have in general. The word fiery there is painful, so the NIV uses the word painful trial. But it's, the idea, if you touch something that's hot, you're shocked by it. Oh, wow, you're surprised by it, and you react. It's the reaction that's getting Emily into trouble. It's the reaction that when Emily reacts, she moves the problem to conflict. We're going to change all of that for her. We're going to give Emily the skills that she needs to move forward. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Now, all we've done today is we've really focused on Emily. We could have spent our whole time on Hannah, but what I tried to do, is work with each of the children independently as we're trying to troubleshoot some of the difficulties in the sibling conflict problem. Because if we try to discipline children together, often we end up with a complicated situation that makes it very difficult. See, Emily's dealing with Hannah, who has her own kind of obnoxious tendencies, and Hannah has her own need to learn how to deal with Emily's obnoxious tendencies. So we have to develop a specific plan for each of the children as we move forward. Okay?
Okay.
All right, I'm going to open the phone lines here, and if you folks, if anybody has a question, there's a way in the webinar for you to raise your hand. So if you push that button, I guess we'll know that you would like to ask a question, and we can allow you to do so. Or maybe if you don't have access to that feature, you'd like to write something into the chat portion, then you can ask a question or make a comment there that we can acknowledge as well. And if nobody has any questions, I'm going to keep talking because I think we can do a lot more for Emily and Hannah.
Laura has a question.
Okay, is this Laura?
It's Laura.
Okay, Laura, tell me, what kind of question do you have? You have a lot of kids too, don't you?
I do. We have 5.
5 kids. Lord bless you.
Yeah, and I'm really encouraged by Shannon and Wes listening to them. My questions have been answered through their situation in a lot of ways. Our agitator is our oldest child as well, which I find surprising that the younger children aren't the ones having the issue. It's the older. He's had more training. He's been through more situations, and so the expectation on him is very high, which I understand that sometimes I put it too high. But what I don't understand is when I can have all 5 children together and remove him from the situation, there is more peace in our family than when he is in it. And being the oldest, that frustrates me with him. I get very, very frustrated with him that he creates that agitation. And what I don't understand as a parent, I mean, I am a National Institute of Biblical Parenting groupie here. I read it all. We role play. We have object lessons. I mean, we do it all. And then I find that the children, they still aren't choosing to act the way that they know is right and good, or that they know is the expectation in the home, and especially frustrated with the older child. So I found it interesting that Shannon and Wes were struggling with Emily being the oldest as well. But if you could talk about that, when all the training is there and you're praying and you're, I mean, scriptures mounted to your forehead literally sometimes, why still do they choose not to have peace in the home?
Well, I'm sure that we could identify a lot of reasons why. I tend not to go back into a child's history or into all kinds of things. I would suggest that at the root of it all is a sin nature that's selfish, that thinks about self instead of thinking about other people. I would say that with your oldest son, how old is your oldest?
10.
Okay, so with your oldest son, you're gonna want to think in terms of therapy with him because he has some remedial issues and he's not up to the level where he should be based on his development and age. He's got some weaknesses. Mm-hmm. If we were to spend time together, I'm sure we could identify exactly what those weaknesses are, whether they're being annoying or whether he's being impatient or whether he's being irresponsible or whether he's being just plain selfish. We're going to identify exactly what those weaknesses are, and then I would suggest we develop a strategy for him, and then life becomes the family life becomes the therapy where we're going to be working on that. One of the attitudes we want to have with him is a coaching attitude. We're saying, come on, let's go. well, that was a wrong response. I want you to go think about it. You can use our break technique that I'm sure you're using. You need to go think about it, come back and let's talk about it. Let's debrief and go through our 3 questions and a statement, and let's figure out how we're gonna handle this differently. And we're gonna do some therapy. I would suggest you're gonna have to do this therapy 20 times a day with him. But we have to identify what we want him to do, not just what we want him to stop doing, so that when he's tempted to reach his hand out and touch someone when he shouldn't, or tempted to interrupt or take something that doesn't belong to him, or whatever, any of those things, when he's tempted to do those things, what should he do instead? We have to get into his heart, get into his mind. We have to develop some plans that are going to work for him in order to help him through. So, again, I would say not only for him, but let's talk about the other children in your family, because they're being impacted by your oldest son. And so every one of those children need to know how to respond lest they develop bitterness in their own hearts. Which means I think we say sometimes, your brother, when he just did that to you, that was wrong, what he did. But how you respond to that's very important. I'm concerned about your heart here, because the way to respond to that treatment of your brother, that is a right response, even when you're not treated fairly. So let's work on that and do the right thing together. So I think if you look at it as therapy, I think your family will continue to grow and develop, and likely you'll see some change in your 10-year-old son as he grows older. That will be very encouraging for you. So I would continue to work on that.
Scott, we have another question. Angie?
Okay, Angie, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Mine is also my firstborn is my challenge as well. Kind of funny.
Yes.
Going around. But anyway, my question had to do with sometimes I see the kids, things can escalate so quickly or get out of hand very quickly. And sometimes I'm trying to figure out when should I get involved? Should I ask or wait until they ask for help? Am I getting into something that I shouldn't be? It's finding that fine line of, when to intervene, when to get involved. Am I encouraging tattling, but you want them to come to you? Those kinds of issues.
Great.
Any advice?
I do. That is such a very important question. Let me say this. The decision to get involved in a child's life depends on whether they are succeeding or failing at their particular task, whether that's schoolwork, homework, finances, whatever it is. The same thing is true in sibling conflict. If a child is hanging in there and trying to be patient with another child who's being annoying, I might allow that to go on for a little bit, but as soon as the child is feeling overwhelmed, that's number 1, or acts out, that's number 2, then I as a parent want to step in and help at that point to offer more parental control to a child who needs that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
What we're trying to do at this point is we're trying to equip each one of our children with the ability, the skills to hang in there. And as soon as you see the intensity develop, pull one of the children out. You don't have to pull them both out. Pull one of the kids out that seems to be involved in this problem. And in your case, it might be the older one, or it might be the one that he's relating to. And you want to pull them out and say, well, we have a problem here. And we need to, you need to go and settle down. And you need to come back and talk to me when you're ready. So what we're doing here is we're trying to help your child develop a better response in these situations. So you want to define what that looks like. So we're telling them here's what we want you to do when you're in that situation, to keep problems, not escalate into conflict. We're also I'm going to be watching you. I want you to partner with me, because here's what you're supposed to be doing when you find yourself in this situation when your brother's yelling in your ear, or whatever it might be that seems overwhelming to you. Here's what you are to do. Are you ready? Maybe we'll go back in there and practice. Brother yell in his ear here. Let's practice doing the right thing. We want to start developing the skills necessary to relate in your family with the situations that exist in the dynamics between the kids that you're relating to. So what we want you to do is develop those skills in the life of your child, which means you're probably going to get involved a lot. Now, when a child's tattling, the purpose of tattling is to get someone else in trouble. That's different than reporting an offense. You want to know you want a sibling to tell you if another sibling is doing something that's wrong or dangerous, you want that to be reported to you. But if a child just saying, Billy left the light on in the bathroom again, if that's what he's doing, then we have a serious problem. That's tattling. And tattling is a form of selfishness. One of the roadblocks to sibling harmony is selfishness in a child's life. And so what we want to do is help children develop the ability to be servants, because, I mean, after all, there were two guys in the Bible. And they came to Jesus and they said the same kind of thing that our kids say to us sometimes. They say this: could we have the best seat when we come into your kingdom? I mean, kids are always fighting over the best seat. And here these two guys, James and John, come to Jesus and say, can we have the best seat? Jesus' answer to them was very revealing and helps us as we're working with our children when they exhibit selfish behavior. The solution that Jesus said was this: if you want to be great in God's kingdom, learn to be the servant of all. So servanthood is a very important skill that our children need to grab onto. And so what we're going to do is help our kids develop that in some very significant ways. So when a child comes tattling and says, Billy left the light on in the bathroom again, you might say, you're right, he did. I'd like you to be a servant and go turn it off. I think that would be a good idea. So what we're doing in that kind of situation is we're developing this sense of servanthood in the life of our kids. So I would suggest that's just one piece of the whole sibling conflict issue. We should probably do another webinar because we've got so many different solutions when it comes to sibling conflict that we could easily take another hour and not touch any of this material and move into some other material that I think would be helpful in the lives of some families. Let's go to another question.
Scott, we've got another question from John.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Yes. Am I coming across?
Yes, you're coming across great. Go ahead.
We have problems. We have 6 children in our family, although one's an infant. And they can be, like you said, very selfish, and it's hard. Sometimes meeting the needs of one takes away from the needs of the other, and getting them to compromise. They're very rigid, and getting them to find a common ground is very hard to do. And we're kind of at a loss. And my oldest has Asperger's, which makes it hard for the socializing part of it.
Sure.
He's very rule-oriented sometimes.
Yes. And so he sees things black and white, and therefore he can get easily upset when things aren't going the way he expects and so on, correct?
Yes.
Plus he has probably some social skill that are lacking, and maybe doesn't pick up on the social cues that are available in the environment to know when to tone it down or so on. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have problems. He has a tendency towards outbursts of getting angry and not thinking of what he wants to say and saying things maybe
Yes.
more than what he wanted to.
Yes. Okay. Your son is has some unique differences that will require some special training, but again, the therapy that you do at home will help him a lot as he's developing the social skills, learning how to manage his emotions, and then learning how to respond properly in given situations. But it's going to take a lot of therapy and work. I'm going to just put that question aside to address the other question that you're asking about sibling conflict for the purpose of this particular webinar on sibling conflict. And that is to say that you're right. Let's see, when you say that the needs of one child compete against the needs of another child, then I think that we can, that's very true as we experience in life some of the challenges as parents, especially when we're parents of a large number of children. Whoever said, I have to go to all the soccer games of all your kids to be a good parent, surely didn't have a lot of kids. I mean, that's ridiculous. And I find that many times we have to pick and choose what we're going to work on with our kids, realizing that some things we're going to let go because we're working on this particular area, or we're going to work with this child in this skill development or character heart quality. We're going to work with this child in this other heart quality, and that's going to mean that sometimes we're going to have to split our time. We're going to give up working with this child for now because we have to work on this other part of life. With 5 kids, as we were growing up, I remember it was often the case that at the end of the day I was saying, wow, I didn't spend time with Melissa doing such and such, or I wish I could have spent more time doing that with Ben. But we have to pick and choose what we're going to do. I think there are a lot of advantages to a large family. And those advantages can be accentuated because now we're transferring responsibility to the kids, and they're going to have to pull in and use some of the skills that they have to make things work. All of that becomes part of the challenge as we're working with our kids. But I think that you have to, I think obviously you know this, with a family of 6 kids, you're going to have to give up some of the expectations that some even may place on you, that you have to do certain things with all the kids, or you may even have those expectations yourself that say, this is what it means for me to be a good dad. With everything torn in all kinds of different directions, we have to pick and choose what we're going to do, and then we're going to delegate and transfer responsibility to others to make up for some of those relational needs in family life in order to cover the ground that we need.
Scott, I wonder if we could just go back to the idea of emotional accumulation for a minute.
Sure.
Can you be more specific about how to address this with a child and giving solutions to the child with this issue of emotional accumulation?
Yes. Okay, so if we take the heart was designed.
I wonder if anybody can see this. Maybe I haven't done it right.
How can I ask if anybody can see it?
I don't know.
All right, let's do this. I won't draw it. I'm going to draw it, but I'm going to talk about it too, okay? The heart was designed for emotions to pass through the heart in order to give us information. Emotions take place in the heart. Emotions are good things, they're not bad things. And they're designed by God to provide us with with emotional cues. I'm not saying all emotions are good. An emotion like jealousy, for example, is not good. But generally, emotions provide us with information about our life situation. In particular, let's talk about anger, because that's one that many children experience. Anger in itself isn't wrong. Anger is a flag that goes up that says something is wrong here. Sometimes if something's wrong is in my heart, I wanted to sit in that chair and you're sitting in it, get out of that chair. Okay, that's a demandingness I have. But if I get up from the chair and then someone gets into that chair just to sneak into that chair and do the wrong thing, then my anger may be because of something outside of me, that the child's done the wrong thing. So anger is an indicator that says something's wrong. The problem with anger is when it accumulates in the heart. And that's why it's so important to allow, that Ephesians 4 says, do not let the sun go down on your anger, that you want to get rid of it. You don't want it accumulating, because when anger accumulates in the heart, it creates problems. We've done other webinars on anger control and anger management, and it's very important for children to understand how to have a plan for this. Not just children, really everybody, but we primarily focus on kids and in family life. Children need to have a plan for not accumulating emotion and offenses in their lives. When they do, then it turns something inside of them ugly. And so that's one of the things I'm saying to kids, whether they're 5 years old or 15 years old, I'm saying you want to be responding well to the problems that you experience in life, or they're going to turn you into an ugly person. So we can't allow them to accumulate. You have to let them go. The words let them go are very important, because that's a paraphrase of another word we have in the Bible. The word is forgiveness. Forgiveness is releasing an offense, letting it go. Children need to learn what that means in very practical terms in order to move forward, but it involves a much bigger plan of dealing with anger and knowing how to respond to it in a positive way. So I would suggest when the webinars do become available, we've already done several of them on anger in children, and you might find them helpful to listen to. Or if you want to do one with us, if you want to be a featured parent, we'll do another one, and we'll talk about how to help your particular child deal with anger and help them overcome some of the tendencies that often happen in life as well. Let's do one more question, Joanne. Do you have somebody else?
I do. I've got Christine here had typed it in and also has her hand up. So let's try it
Okay, Christine, go ahead.
this way first.
Can you hear me, Christine? Well, she typed it in. Let's read it.
All right. Also, she said she could see the whiteboard. Just
Oh,
so
she
you
can
know.
see the whiteboard.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, good.
Where do we go here? All right. Let's see here. Back to talking about Hannah.
Let
Okay.
me say, as I read the comment about Hannah, that we have only dealt with a few things in the situation in this family with Shannon and Wes. There are probably a number of other factors that we could look at in this situation with them. So let's just go back and look at Emily and Hannah as we kind of close out here. I know, let's see, that Wes and Shannon said that the relationship with Hannah was a little bit more smooth than that with Emily. And that's probably for a number of reasons. And that relational dynamic may be a source of contention between Emily and Hannah. We don't know that for sure. So we want to be watching that, and I'm sure that Shannon and Wes are doing that. You want to be sensitive to the dynamic because we are all connected emotionally. And emotions can be a real ally or they can be an enemy depending on how we use them. So we want to make sure that we are recognize the value of this emotional connectedness. But if and I'm not talking about Wes and Shannon. If two husband and wife are arguing, for example, the children feel that there's a connectedness that we have emotionally, and we feel the pressure. Probably in the same way that Wes and Shannon are connected. Have an easy relationship with Hannah. Emily feels that, and so equipping Emily in that way to help her feel more connected with mom and dad might be a helpful way to ease that tension as well. And I think that may have been what Christine was saying as well.
Yeah.
What we tried to do here in this webinar on sibling conflict is identify some of the key areas specifically for this one family to give them some tools for keeping problems and not allowing them to move to conflict. But I hope one of the things you're seeing is that we're working with children individually. All kids are different. And so we can't just take the plan of conflict management or sibling conflict that we had in my home and transpose it into this particular family's life. We've got to look at the children and the individual needs that they have. It looks like in Shannon and Wes's home, they've got a lot of leaders, and they're growing these leaders. But obviously, if leaders don't have some character development in their lives, then they turn into tyrants. So we have to be very careful about that. And that's what Wes and Shannon are concerned about. So I'd encourage you to work with your kids in very practical ways to help them develop skills for dealing with the rest of the kids in their family, recognizing that God brings us all together to grow us in a laboratory of growth that God calls the family. If you'd like more information about our resources, please stop by our website, biblicalparenting.org. And those of you who are participating in this webinar will receive an email shortly that asks for your evaluation and comments. We're grateful that you would fill that out for us. God bless you all.